Now you're talking.
You think that film is a big enough ego booster? Well, I think we need to start talking about me.
Yes. How cool! I got a tear in the eye from that.
Did you?
Yes, I did. Didn't you?
You're a faker.
Only when I have to. No, that was lovely. How about, now, when you see a reel like that, you must be impressed with you. I mean, I would be. I mean,
I start crying.
There you go. See? No, he really does. No, honestly, it must be a shock that you did all that.
Well, I've been doing this job for 60 years. I joined the union when I was 22 years old in Hollywood. And I was really, really young. I was right out of school. And it was exciting and fun. And I got a couple of good jobs to start with.
Very good job. We're going to talk about them right now. But it's true because by the time you were 23, 24, well, he was famous. He was famous like right away.
Well,
some of, you know,
that was like in the early 60s when the Beatles came in. And all the producers thought nobody knew how to do anything except the really young, wet behind the ears kids.
And you got a job.
And I was getting jobs right and left. and all the old guys weren't getting jobs. And I felt badly about it, but not that bad.
I was going to say, not that bad. I think we can sit and continue this conversation.
Sit down. Yeah.
Are we going to let them know that Cher has a low crotch? Well, she does. You'll hear about it later. I mean, I haven't seen it, but someone I know very well does know.
Oh, I've seen it. It's lovely.
So last night, if you were here, we talked about Streisand's lovely chest. Now we're on to her crotch. God knows where this night is going to end up. But I'm staying for it. Oh my, oh my, oh my. Well, I'm excited.
I like your socks.
Oh. I started wearing them because when you're in New York, you know, you don't want to look at people. You're looking down the subway. And so you're looking at your feet. And you don't want to have boring socks.
Do you know how many times I fell in New York on the sidewalk because I tripped over holes in the sidewalk?
Because you're looking up all the time.
I'm looking at everybody. I can't keep my eyes off it.
It's a fashion parade.
It
and
really
a Facebook
is,
parade.
especially, 8th Avenue. Whew.
And you know, it really is, every city has its own fashion people. I mean, the very fashionable San Francisco person, we don't have any in LA, but very fashionable in New York, in San Francisco, it's a very different look, don't you think?
It's different, but people used to really dress up to be noticed. Nowadays, it's like they dress up to scare you, I think.
Where to begin? Where to begin? Well, let's start at the very beginning. A very good place to start. We're going to start with Robert Gordon Mackie, this fellow right here, who grew up in Rosemead, California, born in Monterey Park, but grew up in Rosemead. And your parents, Charles Robert and Mildred Agnes, they divorced early, and you were raised by your British grandmother, who believed children should be seen and not heard.
That's right.
Tell us about it.
Well, because I was a quiet child who just would draw in the corner all day and listen to my grandmother on the phone and all the gossip that went down. And she never knew I was there. I'd be under the dining room table, just drawing and listening. I was a horrible child.
I find that hard to believe, but you were already drawing.
I was already drawing when I was about 5, kindergarten, first grade. I went to movies a lot. Most kids didn't go to that many movies.
Your grandma would take you to the
Well,
movies.
no, it was really my mother. I didn't see my mother except on the weekends and my sister. So that the thing they knew that I liked was to go to the movies. And if it was Technicolor, it was even better. And I was a huge fan of big movie stars at that time, like Carmen Miranda. Does anybody remember her?
Yeah. What's not to love?
I just loved her. And of course, my mother and my teenage sister looked nothing like Carmen Miranda. I mean, Carmen Miranda looked like nothing like anybody in the world except herself. And there were those actresses that tried to copy her, but nobody could quite do the bowl of fruit on the head and all those incredible clothes that she wore.
Very few of us can get away with it.
And my other favorite was Betty Grable. Betty Grable had yellow hair, and she wore pink and turquoise and lavender, maybe all at once. She was just amazing. And I was, 4, 5, 6 years old. And I was very inspired.
It registered early, and as we just saw in the reel there, the ballet scene from American in Paris is when you really said, I can do that.
Well, I was already 11 or 12, something like that, when that movie came out. And I thought about doing costumes, but I didn't think I could do it. And then when I saw that film, I went, oh yeah, this is it.
So many gifted and talented people I've talked to over the years all have that aha moment. A director friend of mine, very big director, and he said he went to see Cecil B. DeMille's The Ten Commandments, and DeMille did a little intro to the film, and he never realized, he loved movies, but he didn't know there was a thing called a director.
Well, I didn't know there was a thing called a costume designer.
There you go.
I thought they just kind of came to work that way, Kids don't question anything. They just take it because there's new stuff every day in their lives. And all of a sudden you see something you've never seen before. And then I realized that movies were different than real life. Did you know that?
Yes, although sometimes they're very closely related. You went to Rosemead High School, which I found very interesting because we were talking one day. I think they know who she is. And his high school chum was a singer. And of all things, Bob Mackie, went to school with Vicky Carr. Anybody remember Vicky Carr? Is that hilarious? Can you see these two in high school?
Well, she was one of those giggly girls. She would just come to voice class and sing like an angel, but then she and her girlfriend would just giggle the whole class. And we thought she was disgusting. But then she'd start to sing, and we'd all go, oh shit, she sings better than anybody else. It was one of those,
Flossie. Her name was Florencia, and they called her Flossie. So next time I happened to call on the phone, I said, hello, Flossie? Who have you been talking to? She was freaked. But I think the two of you in school in the 50s is too funny. Now then you went on to Pasadena College and to Chouinard Art Institute, which was the place. I don't think it exists anymore.
It turned into Cal Arts, which is owned by Disney. And it was a very good school, and they had a lot of costume designer alumni that went there. So we had real costume designers come in and lecture and talk and give us assignments. And I knew that I was in the right place. And I was on scholarship, and I was supposed to stay for 3 years. I stayed 2 years, and I finally said, I've won all of the awards. It's time for me to get out of here and start working. And I was only 22 at the time, and I was out there taking my portfolio around and showing people for about a week, and then the jobs started piling up. I couldn't believe what was happening.
It did happen quickly, because right away, now I know you were at Paramount, of course, but also, and I got confused here, the NBC costume people. Which came first, NBC or Paramount?
No, the television people came later. What happened was there was this designer from New York who was doing a movie with Glenn Ford and Charles Boyer, and they were shooting it in the south of France, and he didn't like to draw men. He didn't know how to draw men. He could draw the lady costumes, but he didn't like to do the men. So he said, would you come in and draw these sketches, beautiful color sketches, very, very much like I have out in the lobby. But those are the current ones from today and maybe 20 years ago, but I've been in the business 60 years, so there's a lot of sketches in my studio piled away.
But it started with being a sketch artist at Paramount. You were working with Edith Head. You're all film lovers.
Well, actually,
Edith Head.
we rented a room at Paramount, and I was there. And all of a sudden, I looked up, and everybody knew what Edith Head looked like because she was quite famous. She was on radio and television constantly and promoting herself. And so she walked in, and I went, oh, Jesus, Edith Head, And she used to be on Art Linkletter's house party, so that's what made her so famous. I don't know if some of you remember Art Linkletter's house party. And then I always used to wonder, well, who needs to see a designer on radio? But then they turned the show into television, and before you know it, she was telling ladies their skirts were too long, and they need to lose a little weight, and don't wear that color, it's not good for you. And she became very famous with the average person, that housewife out there that wanted to improve herself. And that's why Edith today is still famous. Anyway, she came in, and she says, what are you working on today? It wasn't even her. We were renting the room from her. And I said, well, I'm doing these strippers for this new Paul Newman movie. Oh, you do strippers? And I said, well, I know how. You know, when you're 22, how do you know how to do a stripper? But I do. I did.
Now, were you basically doing the illustrations for Jean-Louis and all those, or were you already designing? And
well, it depends on who you were working with. I worked for designers that said, have you read the script? And I said, oh yeah, I read it. Well, what do you think she should wear? And I said, well, I don't know. And she said, no, tell me what you think. And I would tell them, and they said, well, draw some things up. I'm going to lunch. I'll see you later. You know, there's that kind of designer, and those are the ones I loved working for, because I was testing myself constantly. And then I had other ones like Jean-Louis, who was very famous at Columbia and designed for Rita Hayworth and Marlene Dietrich and all these famous kind of glamour girls of the 40s. And he would make me draw things a half a dozen times and paint them and everything before he would accept a sketch. He was a fussy old queen. Anyway, that's another story.
Wasn't that fussy old queen married to Loretta Young?
Yes, he did. Well, she needed somebody to go to mass.
It was a different time, darlings.
No, but they were good friends. They saw each other at church every Sunday, and before you know it, they were married, and they were like best buddies, you know. And they both were interested in fashion.
So let's back up and go back to the NBC costume.
Did I get off our script?
No, there's no script. We go wherever the hell we want.
Okay.
This is our show. Patrick, isn't that right? Absolutely. There you go. No. But I was interested because isn't that where you met Ray Agian when he was doing Dinah Shore, and you were illustrating his designs?
When I was waiting for a couple of these jobs to start, I did take a job out at. I went to visit NBC, which they were the only studio in town that really did color in those days. Everybody else was black and white, if you can imagine TV to be all black and white. But NBC had color, and it was fabulous. And that's where I met people that I worked with for years after. I met Rhett Turner, who I used to do the Sonny and Cher show. He would do all the costumes. I would only do Cher. Or if there was a lady guest star that would do a number with Cher, I would do her clothes as well, like a Tina Turner or a Raquel Welch, or those kind of people, you know, those glamour girls. And they had to go together and look good.
But of course, as you all know, it was Ray Agian and Bob Mackie, who were a famous team, colleagues, professional colleagues, and like longtime partners. So it was a very important figure.
Well, no, Ray Agian was an interesting man. He was from Iran, and he had grown up. His mother was a couturier in Iran, Tehran, and he was doing clothes for the royal family. And he was only like 14, and his mother would have her whole workroom make these clothes for all these kind of royalty and elite people over there.
But Ray always said he was from Persia. He always said Persia.
Well, that's what Persians. Yeah, are there any Persians here tonight?
They don't have Persians in Sedona.
They don't?
I wanted to meet one. Where are they?
Well, anyway, the thing that happened was that, yeah, they were Persians, but then they had the revolution, and all the rich ones went off to Paris and had their apartments there, and Ray came to California to become a movie star, and it all changed because all of a sudden this little kid who hadn't really thought about it much was a very good designer, and he got a lot of jobs. And finally, he said, do you want to go out and have dinner? I said, yeah, sure, I'm hungry. And, and we sat there and talked and talked and talked, and I realized it was the only friend I had that I could discuss what I did for a living or what I was interested in. And, you know, if you can have dinner with somebody and not get bored, that's a good sign.
I loved Ray. He was a little curmudgeon-y, but he was adorable. I loved him.
Well, he was 5'4" and
A good day.
And Persian, had great big eyes and smoked a lot. Yeah.
He was a real character. Your first personal star client was who?
Well, I started working in, what was it, 61, 62 in there. And I would do shows, and I'd work for other designers. And all of a sudden, I started getting calls for me to work because some of the choreographers liked what I did. And I often did just the chorus people. And so they said, you really understand dance, you really understand movement. And a lot of designers just like to make a pretty frock and forget it. You know, they're not thinking about a performer and how they feel in their clothes, and if they can move, and if they can do everything they should do. Or if they look like if Anne Margaret comes on stage, you want her to look like Kitten with a Whip or Anne Margaret. You want her to really look like a movie star. You don't want her to look like the lady, you know, in Benedict Canyon that walks her dog. It's a whole different world. And I found that knowing about performing and understanding how a performer feels when they walk on stage and they get kind of a roar of approval, that's a fabulous feeling for any performer.
And that's Mitzi Gaynor.
Oh, and Mitzi Gaynor. Well, Mitzi Gaynor was the epitome of show business. She loved to entertain. She was funny. She could dance her ass off. She was just unbelievable, and I loved working with her. And she made me laugh all the time. And she was good, and she'd been a performer since she was probably 12 years old or something.
You all remember the Mitzi Gaynor specials? They were unbelievable. Oh my God! And the costumes.
You know, they're bringing them back. Amazon or something is
Yes.
beginning to show them again.
They're really good. And the costumes you did for her, and you talk about movement.
Well, she was just fabulous. She'd do anything to get a good approval, and we had a good time. And I got a couple of Emmys from doing her shows, which is nice.
And not only was she great, so not only, because she did quite a few specials, right? So you did a lot of them.
She did a lot. I guess it was in the 80s, 70s, 80s.
Was it 80s?
Yeah, well, into the 80s.
Huh.
And then
I thought it was 70s.
Mostly 70s.
What?
60s, 70s, and 80s she's talking about.
Thank you, Mitzi. And the really cool thing, not only Mitzi herself, but you met a huge influence on your life and you on her life through Mitzi, who came to see her Vegas show, 9 months pregnant.
See, this was a really good month for me. Mitzi had my first act I did for her in Las Vegas, and we were getting a lot of good attention. And then I won the first Emmy with Ray ever given to a television show for costumes. They didn't even have an award for that. And this was Alice Through the Looking Glass, which was in the 60s. And we got our first Emmy. Nobody had an Emmy for the costumes. And so Carol Burnett said, there's this kid, I keep seeing his name. Who is he? And she was about 9 months pregnant. And so she and her husband trotted off to Vegas, and they saw Mitzi Gaynor do her act, and she did funny stuff and beautiful, glamorous stuff as well. So that's the kind of thing a performer, a lady performer, really wants to be able to have both kinds of things going. And then they watched the Alice Through the Looking Glass, and I won the Silly Emmy. And so she decided that she better have an interview with this kid. And I went to her front door, and I had my shorts on and a t-shirt. She thought I was the paper boy. And I looked pretty young then.
I I've seen photos of you and Carol at that age. You look like you're 12 years old.
I know. Too bad it didn't last, but it's okay.
So she was already primed to do the Carol Burnett show with her husband when she was ready to go?
Well, she had to have the baby first.
Oh, well, you got to do some things to kill time.
But it was quite interesting. And what I found very interesting was that she lived in a house that had once been owned by Harry James and Betty Grable. And I thought, well, she must be very important. She lived in Betty Grable's house. What did I know, you know?
So the Carol Burnett show, 11 years I think it was on.
11 years we did it. And we could have done it longer, except Carol just felt like she'd done a lot of important things.
Well, but let's talk about, that was a weekly show, as we all know. Weekly. You saw the show, you know there were comedy sketches, there were music acts, there were guests. Who do you think put clothes on all those people's back every week? How many costumes would you do each week?
Well, Carol used to tell the story. She was very proud of me and what we did and the amount of show we put on every week. And she said, and he does 50 costumes a week. And then the next year or two, it turned into 60 costumes. She said, she would tell people. And then it became 70 costumes. I mean, some weeks we probably had 100, but who knows? You know, those shows were interesting. And when you do a show for 11 years like we did, we had the amazing wardrobe storage area in the sky. I mean, it was just, if I needed a Minnie Mouse costume, we had one that fit Carol perfectly because it was made just for her. And then when the Sonny and Cher show came on, anytime they did a cartoon character or anything, Cher, they would rent those costumes from the Carol Burnett show because Cher and Carol, and nobody ever believes me when I tell them this, Cher and Carol had exactly the same measurements.
Including crotch?
They had exactly the same measurements. And it was kind of interesting that they could wear each other's clothes. I mean, it was weird because in their heads they were completely different kind of women, but they worked together a lot and they love each other. You know, they were really good performers together.
You know, what's wonderful is that every time Carol does an interview, she always does 10 minutes. I'm sure you've on Bob, and how the characters came to life as soon as she put on whatever he designed. Like, of course, as you saw the famous curtain from, yeah.
No, but she, you know, sometimes I'd get a script and it wouldn't tell me what the character, where they lived, where they came from. And you kind of had to fill those gaps in. As a designer, you say, well, is she a rich woman? Is she an affluent woman who just likes to dress up? Is she poor? And she did all those people. And when we did some of you probably remember Mrs. Wiggins and her boss, Mr. Tudball. Well, the boss was Tim Conway, and he wrote that sketch for the two of them. But he made her into an elderly woman who was a temp working at in an office. And very often temps are there to help you, but they don't know how to do anything. And anyway, and I said to her, I called her that week. I said, you know, you've done so many older ladies, and sometimes the Gray Panthers, that was a group in those days of people that were middle-aged and more, like my age. And I said, they're getting kind of annoyed with you. Why don't we make you into one of those really stupid temp girls that come in and can't do anything except their nails and watch the clock for lunch? And she went, oh. She said, what would I wear? And I told her exactly what she was going to wear. And all of a sudden, Mrs. Wiggins became this sort of Farrah Fawcett wannabe, in the office with her tight skirt and too much jewelry and blonde Farrah Fawcett hair. And that's how a lot of the characters got started. We just had to make it a little different. And from then on, we were always working on the characters. It was very important. And when she played the famous Nora Desmond, the old silent movie star, every week I would try to put something different on her because she was like a clothes horse from the silent movie days and lived in her fancy house on Sunset Boulevard with her chauffeur, butler, lover, played by Harvey Korman. Harvey, I don't know how you feel about Harvey Korman, but for me, Harvey Korman was the absolute gift from God to Carol. He was so good. And a pain in the ass sometimes, but wonderful to work with at the same time.
And the curtain thing was your idea completely. I mean, she didn't know. You just showed up and you stuck the curtain rod in her shoulders.
Well, the curtain thing was one of the hardest ones ever. I read the script and I said, everybody's seen Gone with the Wind. They know the joke. So what am I supposed to do? And I thought, well, we could make a dress that looks like the one in the movie, but that's not funny. We've already seen that. And I really had trouble that week. And it wasn't, we started on a Monday, we shot on Friday, and it wasn't until late Wednesday, early Thursday that I got the old curtains from CBS and a curtain rod or two, and I played around with it. And then I called her and I said, I want to show you this. And she's, we have to show Harvey because he'll never get through the sketch. And so she kind of snuck him into the dressing room and showed me what was going to happen. And it's one of the most popular comedy sketches we've ever done. And people come to me every day, somebody mentions that to me. And like I said once, it will be on my tombstone. You know, he did the curtain rod dress.
I say go for it. On a milestone birthday you had at your house, a party, who arrives? The gorgeous and elegant, I adored her, Diane Carroll, in a facsimile of the curtain rod dress. Diane Carroll. And Carol Burnett, of course, was at the party.
And Carol was there, and it was my birthday, so I had some pretty good names there that night. And of course, everybody knows what that joke is. And you know that whole outfit is at the Smithsonian now.
Yes. And that's when you were having a little row with Cher, and I gave you a birthday present of a Cher piñata so you could beat the shit out of it. You did.
You know, there were days when a piñata comes in handy.
You know, I'm back a little bit to movement because dancers like Mitzi, I've seen, you know, Pete, you run into dancers from the Burnett show, and they all worshipped him because he gave them clothes and costumes they could dance in and move in. That's a big, big deal because, as you say, some designers don't do it.
Yeah, but that's part of the job.
But not everybody does it.
Well, not everybody knows how to, or has a feeling for it. I said in that sizzle reel, you really have to understand performing and what it's like to put the right thing on, to the right music, and come out and do the right movement, and get a laugh on the right, line that maybe you just said. It's just a very important thing. And being a costume designer, they say, oh, you must have so much fun. And I said, no, it's hard work. You really, I'm always, if I don't get that laugh the first time they wear something when it's supposed to be funny, I'm like ready, I'm suicidal. But it's important, you have to think it out. It's a serious moment. And then when the show's over and you got all your laughs, then you can start laughing.
Before we get to Cher, we're about to get to Cher and her infamous crotch. How many times have I said crotch in this interview so far? I'm like obsessed.
Cher has a beautiful, beautiful body. She has a very long body. Her privates are on the low side, let's put it that way. But she has beautiful legs. The woman didn't realize as a young girl how amazing her physical qualities and were. I mean, she knew she'd look good in a bikini, But when you're, 18, 19, if you don't look good in a bikini, go home. You know.
Well, but before we really get into Cher, there was some journalist, I don't know who it was, dubbed you the Sultan of Sequins, the Raja of Rhinestones.
Well, I had all those
How did you feel about
I
that?
had
Did you feel
all
that
these
was tacky?
stupid names because I got a lot of attention from the clothes I did for her, and then it became a lot of different people as well. And they gave me these nicknames, and they said, that freaky Bob Mackie.
Yeah, but you know what? You said something wonderful, which is what you were just talking about right now. I don't say you responded to that with this quote, but if the quote fits, you said, I'm very serious about my work. It's not just flamboyant, crazy stuff. It's all very worked out. And that's basically what you were just saying.
Well, any kind of good business you do or anything creative, you better figure it out. It doesn't just happen, magically. And especially when you're doing comedy. You can just, the slightest little change in a costume can get a laugh that you can't buy that.
It's like visualizing, writing a script. This word is funny. That word is not funny.
That's
You're
very
picking
true.
Exactly.
One of the first things I the first week I worked with Carol, she says, I'm doing this sketch and I have to jump in and out of the window. And she says, I guess I should wear pants. And I said, oh honey, no. You wear a tight skirt, so you have a lot of trouble jumping out of that window. And I said, nobody's legs are funnier than yours. And I mean, they're beautiful legs, but you know what to do with them to get a laugh. And she went, oh, you're right. And I don't think she ever wore pants to do slapstick again. She always, if I wanted her legs to look, because she had long, slender, beautiful, beautiful legs. And if I wanted them to look just plain skinny and her feet to look big, I'd buy these big kind of, therapeutic shoes with big heels and square toes. And then she would wear, a skinny hose and then and you could change her whole physical thing. I mean, and she and Sharon had the same body. What can I tell you? It was just interesting how you could change people. And when we had Cher as what's her name? Joe, what's her name? Where is he?
Who are you talking about?
I forgot the character's name. The character that Cher plays with the red hair and the leopard skin jumpsuit.
Oh, right. What is it?
No, it's not the vamp.
Whatever, we
she's
remember.
She's the lady at the laundromat.
Yeah, we know who she is. Joe is obviously drunk in some alley.
Yeah, is he drunk?
You're going to meet him in a minute. It'll be fine. Now, of course, there's so many Cher designs we could be here all night. But there was one, I believe, that you were very unhappy about designing. You didn't want to do it, and when it was done, you said, "Never give me credit for it."
Well, she admitted that on the tape. She bicycle pants, which were pretty ugly to start with, those tight pants came above your knee, were very popular at the time. And she wanted to do this sexy number on a big ship with 5,000 sailors. And it was the most vulgar looking outfit. It was all see-through with a strip right up the crotch. I mean, it was just horrible. And I said, you can't wear this. I said, if you do wear it, please don't tell anyone I had anything to do with it, because I don't approve. And she said, I'm wearing it. It's cool. Everybody's wearing these now. Well, no, they weren't wearing that. Anyway, and she admits today, at 75, maybe that wasn't the right thing to wear. And the funny part was that her 12-year-old son was playing bass on the ship at the same time with his bright platinum blonde hair, and there he was playing the bass, and his mother was running around half naked. But that's another story.
We'll jump ahead because of course the Broadway musical, The Cher Show. Anybody here been to New York and seen The Cher Show, the musical? We have Another one. The highlight, and all the reviews said it, was the segment. It's kind of a runway segment. There's about 30 of her most iconic dresses, and there's a runway scene where one after another, and people are screaming through, and it wakes them up from the rest of the show. And they're walking down, oh yeah, honey. And so they're walking down the runway, and it absolutely stole the show, much as your costumes did with Funny Lady. You know, but there were over 500 costumes in the Cher musical. 500 costumes that you did.
Well, but what is a Cher show without a few outfits? You know?
The runway thing I'm describing is 35. Just that is 35. But my point is, you're like a machine. Who else could do a Carol Burnett show every week with all those costumes and a musical with 500 costumes? Don't you find that that's unique?
Well, yeah, it was kind of unique at the time, but like anything else.
At the time, the musical was 10 minutes ago.
But you had to, if you're doing a show about the Cher show. There was even a guy that played me. There's this Bob Mackie character up on stage, you know, and prancing around the stage and being funny and dancing and carrying on. And I used to have these sweet ladies that would come out during intermission, and she says, "You're much better looking than that one on stage." Which I love that because, you know, he was probably 40 years younger than me, but that's another story too.
You could have done this show. You could squeeze that in, I'm sure, on everything else. And it gave him, he won a Tony Award. He won a Tony Award, the Drama Desk Award, and it's like you got discovered all of a sudden after all this time.
I mean, I was so damned old when I finally got to New York to do that show that I kind of deserved them all, I decided.
Well, I found a quote somewhere. I don't think this was in your acceptance speech, but you said, "When I was 10 years old, I announced to the world I wanted to be a costume designer on Broadway. 70 years later, I received my first Tony nomination and won. Needless to say, I am delighted."
You know, you can't, very often you do really good work. I found that doing a weekly show, like on the Carol Burnett show, all that wonderful, brilliant work and funny stuff, not just my work, but hers and all those incredible people that acted on this show, she won Emmy Awards, but none of us, the set designer, the costume designer, none of us ever won an award on the Carol Burnett show, because she was on every week. They just took us for granted, really. And that's okay. We were thrilled to have the job, believe me. And I loved it. I did it for 11 years, and I could have quit many times, but I just said, no, I love it. This is my family. I love being here.
And you and Carol loved each other and still do. I mean, she would do anything you asked her to do, and you had this wild imagination. It was a perfect marriage.
She's a very special lady. And when we were breaking in that big show in Chicago, she was there doing her questions and answers show that she does in theaters the next night. So she came to our first dress rehearsal and sat there and watched the whole thing and was so gracious with the whole cast. She is one of the nicest, loveliest women anybody will ever meet, believe me. Thoughtful and lovely.
So we're going to do quick ladies. I don't say you have to give me one word about this actor. No, it's not a game. Don't get scared.
Well, it is. It's like in those movies. They say, "I'm going to say one word," and you.
No, I'm not doing that. I wouldn't do that to you.
Yeah.
But I do want them to. They've seen a lot there. But think about this group.
Okay.
Anne Margaret,
Kitten with the Whip. Anne Margaret is, again, one of those really gracious people. She's the first one to send you candy at Christmas. I just adore her. And gorgeous, you know, who could dance and sing, but lovely. And she says, "Oh, I don't want to look too sexy." And I say, yeah, sure.
She just is, huh?
But she just is. Some people it just oozes out of them. And the other ones, you have to kind of play a few tricks on them. But that's enough.
Angie Dickinson.
Well, Angie Dickinson. is again one of those people in show business that you can't help but just like. She's so likable and gorgeous, and you know she's up in my age now, and doesn't do that kind of work anymore. But I know one time her legs were insured for $1 million from Lloyd's of London or something, you know, which I always found kind of amusing. What are you going to do if you don't have legs if you get $1 million?
You're careful when you're shaving them, I'll tell you that. The gold dress Sharon Stone wore in Casino.
Oh yeah, did any of you see Casino with Sharon Stone and Robert De Niro? Well, I didn't design that movie, but the designer is one of those designers that doesn't do that kind of heavy-duty Vegas glamour. And a boy that used to work with me, who's a lovely designer now in movies, Daniel Orlandi, was working for her at the time. He says, come on over to Bob Mackie's. He's got stuff that you'll like. They used half a dozen different gowns and stuff that I had in my archives. And it was kind of fun to see Sharon Stone in this dress that was all kind of see-through with gold grapes all in the right places.
Broadway's Bernadette Peters, and of course Pennies from Heaven. She was in that film.
Bernadette Peters is a real Broadway star. She did a few movies back in the, I guess, 70s, maybe late, early.
Steve Martin years.
With Steve Martin. Well, that was her boyfriend at the time. They broke up. She went back to New York and just did one Broadway hit after another. And she is amazing. And these girls, most of them now are in their 70s. And Bernadette Peters looks like she's just turning 19. How she does it, I don't know. And gorgeous and talented, and sweet. Again, when you really like somebody in the business, you want to hang on to them forever.
The elegant Diane Carroll. I love that lady. Diane Carroll, you always
Diane
dressed her
Carroll.
so classy, just beautifully.
She really a classy lady. We're missing her a lot this year. We lost her last year, and she, you know, everybody doesn't live forever, but when you lose somebody that talented that early in their career, it's sad.
And a lovely lady. She was
A lovely lady. A lovely lady.
The Madonna dress that she wore with Michael Jackson for the Oscars.
Well, she did a whole number in it, and he happened to be her date. Talk about a weird couple.
The Odd Couple.
I mean, the next day, I didn't even realize he was there. I was, you know, the next day in the paper, there was Michael Jackson, looking like Michael Jackson, and Madonna looking like Marilyn Monroe. And you said, well, how did that couple ever happen? Just figure it out. I don't know.
They were in all the newspapers.
They were everywhere.
They knew what
Yes.
they were doing.
Yes.
Pink, you saw the tours with Pink, but Pink was a handful.
Pink's a handful, but she's a trapeze artist that writes incredible songs and sings the hell out of them. Who does that? You know.
Only Pink.
Only Pink. And she's amazing. I'm a huge fan. I don't always get along with her, but I'm a huge fan.
And the goddess, Tina Turner.
Oh, well. I met Tina when she was just leaving the famous Ike. And she was like hiding out from him. And she was doing guest spots on TV variety shows. And I ended up dressing her several times. And a lot with Cher, because they love each other. I mean, they work together so beautifully. And she's just very special. I did her last world tour, and it was really fun going back to that and going over to Switzerland. She lives on the lake in Switzerland. How bad is that? and she's just so funny and so bright. And I've been a fan of hers for years. We happen to be exactly the same age, so figure it out.
I don't know if you saw her last tour, but it was kind of, I don't know, cable, I don't know what it was, but...
Well, she did the song, she did the character in one of her numbers from that desert thing, that wild... What's it called? Mad Max, thank you.
Mad Max,
And
that's right, that's
we
right.
had all these sexy guys in their rags and leather belts and all that stuff. I mean, it was pretty. It was kind of nasty, but good. Yeah.
I remember 2 visits up at your studio. And one time I went up there, there was a head, you know, like wig stands, and there was this bejeweled headpiece. I mean, it was so dazzling. You needed sunglasses. It was full and diamonds. And I said to you, let me guess, Cher? And you said yes. She said it's not sparkly enough.
That girl has been spoiled over the years.
I guess so. You couldn't have put one more rhinestone there. And the other was, I go up there and you had a rack, and there were these brown rags. They looked like somebody, you know, like at the car wash. They were this big hanging. I said, what the hell is that? Oh, that's Tina Turner's costumes from her last tour. They were this big.
Well, Tina loved looking like, well, I have this interesting story. Tina loved looking like a cave woman, you know, and she performed it with this verve. And it was one year, and Raquel was doing her first, Raquel Welch, the sex symbol of the 60s or whatever it was. She was doing her nightclub act across Europe, and she says, I want a dress that reminds you of Tina Turner. And I said, okay. So I made this kind of ragged, strippy, ragged thing all in brown, root beer colored beads and diamonds, and she looked like a cave woman who got rich really fast. and it appeared on the cover of a French magazine, and there she was, and I got this phone call. It's like the next day, and it was Tina Turner. And Tina Turner says, Bob, I'd have to have a dress like that. Who did that dress? And I said, I did that dress. And then I told her the story how Raquel wanted to look like her. And it was amazing how happy that made that woman. And it was after that we just did one cave woman dress after another, covered in stones and topazes and diamonds, and she was a happy woman for years.
We've talked about some of the ladies. There were some I'm sure we left out, but now we're going to get a dose about the real Bob Mackie, because lurking in the wings, I see him back there. Well, it's a little scary. He's headed. Director design for Mr. Mackie, 21 years, so he knows all the dish. Please welcome Joe McFate. Can we get another chair out here?
This is Joseph. I sometimes say Joseph is my nanny. He makes me do all the right things. If I say something bad about somebody, he slaps my hand and says, you can't do that.
But it doesn't work, does it, Joe?
The one time that my back teeth are floating and I go to the loo, he asks, who is the redhead that Cher played? Laverne.
Oh, all right. Be seated, gentlemen.
You know, I'm older, and I do forget things that I've known my whole life. And that happens on a daily basis.
So, Joe, and don't
Yes.
forget, he's still paying you.
I know, and he's still sitting right next to me.
Be nice.
When Bob is at work, because I know recording artists and stuff, but they're doing an album and that's it. They just focus. Bob, I've seen him in his studio working and he's doing his thing, but what a process, or what can you tell us about the actual work process when he's, like, say he's going to do Tina's concert or Pink, whatever?
Bob believes that every effort is a team effort. And what I found most extraordinary about working with Bob, and still working with Bob, is that he does the work. So if you see a beaded dress, I can pretty much guarantee that he drew the embroidery on that dress. He doesn't hand it off to someone else. He does it. And it's remarkable. No, he doesn't do the sewing.
No, I don't sew them on.
So the process is kind of amazing. Imagine, for me, I came from New York and I came to Hollywood thinking I knew something. What I have seen in the last 21 years is unbelievable and remarkable, and I owe Bob a great deal.
I told him to be nice.
Wait till my book comes out.
And if you're at the party later and you get him in a corner, you might hear a whole other story, by the way. So I know that you all, like when Pink went on tour, then you guys go for at least the opening performance, opening week, because you all know there's a last one. Oh my God, that dress didn't work.
Sometimes.
One time I was so pissed off at her, I just said, I'm not staying any longer. And I took off, I went home, and Joe stayed. Now that's a hero.
So you've been in the Lion's Den many times.
Well, a lot of times, an extra pair of hands, an extra set of eyes. I went to Germany with Pink.
Can you tell that story?
Well, I can't tell
Yeah,
that.
yes, you can.
Tell it. She's not here. Anybody here friends with Pink? No, you're safe.
They all know what boobs are.
So Bob had designed an elaborate wardrobe for Alicia, and as you know,
Her name is Alicia.
Alicia Moore. She's from Doylestown, PA. And
Pink is not a real name.
No. So imagine. So I went to Germany with her, and I took a fellow who was the main cutter fitter. His name is Kelly, and the two of us were terrified because, quite frankly, Alicia changes her mind a lot.
She's scary.
So Bob had designed this elaborate wardrobe that was based on a leotard. Because she does all that acrobatic stuff, she also had to look sometimes glamorous, sometimes rock and roll, but everything was based on that leotard. What she didn't tell us is that she was rappelling from 90 feet in the air on a crane over the stadium. And Bob had designed a sort of a dhoti pants and a little bolero jacket. Well, she has to lock her legs around a cable and rappel to the stage. Well, so here we are in Germany. We didn't have another costume. We didn't have a new backup rack of clothes. The whole show was geared to this comes here, this. And she said, well, I can't wear this. So we ended up, we made her a little black dress that went over her leotard, and it broke away at the last minute, and it had a big set of Tina Turner wings because she thought that was so cool. So she rappelled to the stadium with these giant pleated wings over everyone's head, and she got a huge round of applause. I mean, they went wild. During rehearsal, 90,000 people in this stadium, I hear, Joe McFeet, my tits are falling out of this costume. The crew guys are scattering, they're all terrified, they're like, what's she gonna do?
Get their binoculars out.
Yeah, I was going to say, they're right. Selfie.
So I took the God mic, like this mic, and I said, bring him down here and let me have a look at him. And she did, and we fixed it. It was just a strap, but you know.
Now the personalities, because some of the ladies, and you've already talked about, who were lovely, Diane, Carol, and Margaret, lovely, and I bet most are, but some have got to be brutal. And have you ever had ladies you just don't want to dress anymore because they're just not worth it? You don't have to name it.
No, we just say they're a challenge.
All right, challenging. So have you ever decided not to be challenged anymore by someone?
Well, there are those that are a challenge, but they're such a delight, you love them. And then there are those challenges that you never want to see them again. But there are very few of those. And in all those 60 years I've been doing this, there are very few people that I've walked out of a fitting and said, you figure it out.
When Pink first came to Bob, he did, 35 sketches, and she loved every one of them, and she said, I want them all. I want every single one of these. And I think you were impressed by her talent, and she was...
Well, I love her look, too. She had this amazing athlete's body that, you know, she could do anything up in the air. It was just wild. And then, of course, she sang amazingly, this big voice, and wrote all those songs. I think she's richer than we think she is.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I'm saying sometimes, even though they may be challenging,
Yes.
you are so respectful of their talent, you almost put up with it because they're so gifted.
Well, they're always the pain in the ass people that just, like we were talking last night about Barbra Streisand, who is wildly talented. And, but at the same time, she questions every single thing. She never believes anything you tell her. and you just want to just like, you know, put a hatchet in her head, but that's another story.
Yes, but to be fair, I am sitting next to someone else who questions everything.
You know, seeing the two of you together, a little Fibber McGee and Molly going on here, and I'm reminded many moons ago when I first started to do my play, Gaetino, and you were going to dress me. That's when it's good to know good people. And I was looking for a particular kind of pants, you know. I actually like Lily Tomlin, that very tailored pants. And so I went to the studio.
I thought you wanted zoot pants.
What?
I thought you wanted zoot pants, zoot.
Well, turned out to be that, yes.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, Joe was there, and we're going through clothes, and you know, talk about, I should have said anything. I'm like, yeah, well, that's all right. And finally, Mr. Mackie comes, and he says, did you find anything? I said, no. He said, well, he goes, and he comes back 30 seconds later with this unbelievable pair of trousers, and he said, I think you'll like them. They're Adobe, the color. And Mr. McFate sneers, paprika. Color is very important to designers, and I wore those goddamn paprika pants to death on tour for a couple of years.
You did.
I'm so glad we had this time together. But I think people are chomping at the bit for some Q&A. Do you have some Q&A you want to get going
We
here?
have lots of answers.
Yes, you do. I'm going to come to you with the microphone, but may I first say, I have done this festival 17 years. I've never had a more enjoyable Q&A, ladies and gentlemen. Have you? Remarkable. I'm going to fire the first one. Raise your hand, and I'll come to you with the microphone. But when Joe and I were talking about all the details and things, I asked him to describe the relationship between you and Mr. Mackie, and he said...
You're going to ask this question.
Yes, I am.
So people used to say, what is your relationship? And I would say, it's like Blake Shelton and Adam Levine. See, you get it. Bob would roll his eyes. I said, would you rather we be Oprah and Gail?
So, Oprah and Gail, take us into the design studio, and how has this magic worked for 21 years? I mean,
It doesn't work every day.
and it doesn't work that much. And who wins the arguments? Who wins the arguments if you don't agree on something? What? Oh, okay. Anybody right here?
Very often when you do a sketch, you have a vision in your head of what's going to appear in physical. How many times does the transfer not happen? Like when you're drawing it and then it appears and you say, nah, that's not what I wanted.
There's a lot of that going on. You know, a lot. I'll do a whole drawing and maybe part of it I don't like. I slap another piece of paper over it. I redraw it, correct the things that I don't like in the outfit. Or maybe I don't like the pose. It doesn't look like the person that I'm drawing. It's important because you don't want them to be off in the wrong idea of what I'm drawing. You know, I don't stand like that. You have to kind of think of that. I'm not a portrait artist, but I do think I capture the spirit pretty much.
But I think the answer, though, lies sometimes in the fitting room. So we do a muslin or a mock-up of it and say, well, maybe that is too long or too short, or the sleeve is the wrong width. So those things do change sometimes in a fitting.
We don't, you know, there are people that make costumes and deliver them with no fittings. We don't do that, ever. I mean, it just can't happen. It can't happen. It has to be made just for them. And costumes have tricks. They have things that break away easily and do things that you never think about in real clothes. These aren't real clothes. These are, you know, get-ups. And they do things. They have tricks.
Huge fan. Loved Carol Burnett. How long, I don't think so. How long did it take and how many seamstresses did it take to put 50 costumes together for the Carol Burnett show on such short notice?
Well, I I tell you, we had one of the best work. Early on, when I started working with Ray on a lot of TV and movies, we opened a workroom, and we made sure we had the best people in all of Hollywood to come and work there. And we treated them like goddesses, the sewing ladies and the tailors, the men that could do these amazing things, and milliners that could make incredible hats. You're only as good as what you put on their back. You can say, well, it looks good in the sketch, but sometimes it doesn't look good on them. You have to work with the person. And it's interesting. I love doing that work.
38, 40 people in that work?
We'd have, at least 40, and sometimes more if we were doing like a big huge Vegas show. We did Jubilee in Vegas, which ran for 34 years. And there was like 1,000 costumes in one show. And, and half the time the girls had no tops on. But we had a director, which I appreciated. So he was the director, and he would hire the girls. He says, I want them to have pretty little boobs. I don't want those big ones. And I can't tell you how much more tasteful the show looks when...
It's Hallelujah Hollywood, right?
Well, Hallelujah Hollywood was our first one. And then after that, we did Jubilee. And Don Arden, our director and producer, died about 5 years into Jubilee, and nobody wanted to do a new show, so they just kept it running for years and years and years. It's not there anymore.
Question right over here.
Yes.
Hello. It's such an honor to be in your presence, really.
Thank you.
I was going to ask about Bette Midler. I've seen many of her stage shows. Did you do her mermaid costumes?
You know what? No, I didn't. That was done in New York. I've done a lot of costumes for Bette. I adore Bette. What she was doing, Hello Dolly. I spent a couple of hours after the show, we just sat and talked and had the best time. She is, for me, one of the most amazing, real, good, old-fashioned show business performers. When she walked out on that stage as Dolly, and she smiled at the audience went crazy, just from a smile. Can you imagine when she opened her mouth to sing and say something funny? It was a wonderful night. And then a few months later, Burnett Peters took over the same show as Dolly, and it was like a whole other character, and beautifully done, but a different personality. Every actress, especially ones that play these big leading lady parts, when the show is named after them, they can kind of bring a lot of themselves into a part. And it's very interesting to see that happen. Bernadette also did Annie Get Your Gun. She did Gypsy, played Mama Rose. She's just an amazing performer, but they're all like that. And I did Gypsy with Bette Midler as well, and she played Mama Rose. And that was quite a Mama Rose. Yes?
Hello, Mr. Mackie, and thank you for coming to Sedona. So nice to see you here. I'm wondering, what's your favorite part of the design process? Is it seeing the actual creation come to life on the person for which you designed it, or is there some other part in the process that is really the peak for you?
Well, that's a hard one. The most exciting is to see somebody walk out on stage dressed the way I thought they should look, and you can feel an audience when they react to a performer that looks a certain way, and they know it's right, and then sometimes you see them walk out and you say, oh, let's change that. We'll fix that one. Sorry about that. But basically, you have to think about the performer. A performer knows when the audience is reacting to them. They know. And they're happy about it, believe me. Yes?
I want to express my gratitude to everybody on stage. Danny, you know how deeply grateful I am for our relationship. But Bob and Joe, For more than a decade now, I've been calling you for Barbie dolls for fundraising events for different nonprofits here in Sedona. Joe, there was a time we had a $900 bid on a Barbie and two women were dreadfully at each other's throats. I sent an email to Joe on Monday. On Wednesday, I had a second Barbie to keep them both happy. I went to my computer and I went back through our fundraising events, and I've made $19,000 in Barbie dolls for nonprofits here in Sedona, Arizona.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
There's something magical about that little 12-inch girl. People just like her, and of course there's a lot of, grown ladies here that probably had them as children, and you just never quite get over that Barbie doll thing. I was in art school when the first Barbie came out, and I said, she doesn't look like a fashion doll, she looks like a hooker. and the interesting thing is the first Barbies done were copies of a little kind of a sex doll from Germany. And she looked like Brigitte Bardot. And the lady that owned Mattel found her, and she said, oh, this would be the perfect toy. And I remember seeing a picture of it, and I said, this doesn't look like, Audrey Hepburn looks like a fashion doll, but this doll doesn't. But over the years, we've changed the doll, the heads have changed, their little figures have changed. Everything has just been, worked out. And I hadn't done a Barbie in several years recently. And they came to me recently, and a year from this coming Christmas, they're coming out with another holiday that I did. It's my first one in, 10, 15 years or so.
She's going to be an angel.
She's an angel, and she has wings, but she's kind of a Vegas angel, if you know what I mean. And she's made in such a way that you can somehow put that stem that's the last one on the tree, goes right up her dress, and she looks amazing at the top of the tree.
Well, now that money's been mentioned, and the seamstresses, entertainment being entertainment, can we talk about your lawyers? You must have a lot. Do you always sell? Do you sometimes sell? Do you keep some of it? Do you have a 20,000, 200,000 square foot warehouse? What do you keep and what do you let go of? And what's the future of that?
Well, it's a good question and pretty smart. It's hard. We have a couple of storage places. Bob also has every drawing from the time he was 11 or 12 years old. And they're like map drawers, like cartographers' drawers, and there are about 70 of those drawers. And occasionally, for a charity or for an auction, we sell Bob's sketches. The clothing's another issue. We still maintain most of Cher's wardrobe, and we have a lot of the clothes that Bob designed that are legendary, so things from the Carol Burnett show and this and that. Many of our more recent performers own their clothes, so we don't take care of those. Pink, for one, she owns all of her stuff. So there's that. And we don't have a lot of lawyers. we have one poor guy who's overworked.
And most of the lawyers have no idea. They look at these clothes and they cost how much? How much is this worth?
Just about 5 years ago, Julian's Auction sold Cher's Turn-Back Time costume. We call it the Swiss cheese.
For obvious holy reasons.
Right. For $65,000. Now Cher owns that. It had nothing to do with us. And then 2 weeks ago, they resold the same leotard and tights for $115,000. So they set a record on something that Bob designed, but really had no financial stake in. Too bad.
It's interesting. The famous Marilyn Monroe thing, which I didn't really design. I just did the sketch for the designer of Marilyn Monroe singing to John F. Kennedy on his birthday in Madison Square Garden. How much did that sell for?
$4 million.
You know, you gotta be some crazy person to spend that kind of money on a dress that's already...
There's some old guy in some little village wearing that dress, happy as a clam. You know that's true. I don't want to forget, you have a book coming out. Don't you tell us about the book?
I do have a book. It's called The Art of Bob Mackie. Can you imagine?
That's right.
And
It's 287 pages, and it's a new sort of compendium of, there are old photographs that we've never published before from Bob's early days in television, beautiful photographs in color of Mitzi Gaynor and some of his early clients, and then there's a whole rock and roll section. It's written by Frank Velasnik, and if any of you guys like Broadway theater, Frank wrote a huge other compendium of Broadway. It's a big silver book, and his partner is Laura Ross, and so that's coming out this November. But you can pre-order it on Amazon.
And how do they do that, Joe?
Today. And there are there's the cover shot, and there's a couple of sample pages. We have a beautiful foreword by Carol Burnett, and an afterword by...
Yeah.
Who else?
I thought it was going to be pink.
Can you imagine?
lift her up on the trapeze.
She's still up there. Hey, my tits are still falling out. And tell us about the documentary.
Well, what you guys saw tonight is the first time it's ever been shown in front of anyone other than our very small group. It's being directed and produced by Matthew Miele and Ann Chertoff. And what's so remarkable about these guys is they had much success with a documentary about Bergdorf Goodman and also about the Cafe Carlyle in New York. So they were already established documentarians, and they came to us and said, we'd like to do a documentary about you. As many of you know, certainly film festival aficionados, there are a lot of steps to making a documentary happen, and we had stopped and started on many different producing partners. Matthew and Ann were the first who came to us and said, we want to make a really good documentary first, and then we'll figure out how to market it. So we do not have a distributor, but that's where we are. We're almost done.
And we will be showing it at the Sedona Film Festival. So we've got a question up here in the balcony, but I normally don't set up a question, but this man is so special to us. Paul Lennon used to tour. He's a comedian, a retired comedian, but you're still very funny, Paul. He opened and toured with Sonny and Cher. So he's been very special. We've gotten some of the behind the scenes. Those of us who are in his friends circle have gotten some of the wonderful behind the scenes stories from Sonny and Cher. But I just
knows all the good stories. I'm sure.
Exactly. So that's who we have asking the next question.
Yeah, I've got a question that I've been sitting here thinking about. Bob, did you ever turn down a job with somebody, and if so, for what reason?
Well, there were a couple of offers back in the good old days, and I was doing both Sonny and Cher, which was just Cher's clothes basically, and the Carol Burnett show. And one of them was the movie The Great Gatsby, and I wanted to do it so badly, but I couldn't quit. These other two shows they were like family to me. They were my first important shows, and I couldn't leave. And I stayed with them till the very end. And sometimes I'm happy about it, and sometimes I said, gee, that person got a big Oscar, and it would have been nice, but you know.
You got nominated.
It's important to do what you love to do in life, if you can, if you get a chance. A lot of people never get a chance to do something they're dying to do, and I was lucky. Quite lucky. Thank you.
And you've been inducted into the Television Hall of Fame, so that was nothing to sneeze at.
Well, yeah. In the TV Hall of Fame, that made me really happy because they'd never had a costume designer in the TV Hall of Fame, and a below the line person, you know, that wasn't a performer or a choreographer or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, it was quite wonderful, and I got it the same night that Tim Conway and Harvey Korman got theirs, and Carol was there, and Diane Carroll gave it to me. It was just one of those amazing, fun nights that you don't forget. You know, it's important. And it was important to me because I really believed in television. You know, when I was younger, television was thought of as kind of like the secondary entertainment, not particularly good. Now some of the best work we see in the entertainment world is on television. And believe me, there's a lot of good stuff on, and a lot of crappy stuff too. But you don't have to watch the crappy. Did you know at the Enchantment they show porno? I just discovered that.
Oh, and how did you discover that, Bobby?
Well, I was flipping around and I went, wait a minute. You know, I just thought that was so interesting. That's the last place I expected to see that. You know what? I'm leaving in the morning, so I haven't seen anything really. I didn't see any performances, but I just thought you'd like to know that.
Thank you for being here tonight. Good night, everybody. Where's Jack? Oh,
In your illustrious career, 2 questions. Is there one costume that stands out in your memory as the hardest one you ever had to make? And is there one that stands out as your favorite one that you ever made?
Well, very often the hardest is not your favorite, you know, and it can work both ways. Excuse me. Actually, when I did the Queen Elizabeth costume for Whoopi Goldberg to wear on the Academy Awards, that was a tough one because she had her entire gown and her own wig as Whoopi on underneath the whole thing. But you see, it was on television. Nobody is ever impressed by a quick change on television because it's magic, you know. And she changed within like a minute. Face, everything, and the costume came off. It was like a Volkswagen that had a Queen Elizabeth costume over it. It was just amazing, and that was really fun. One of the most exciting costumes, and it was just pure surprise, was when Cher appeared on the cover of Time magazine in her see-through dress in 1975, and it was like, oh my God. And a lot of places wouldn't sell it. They thought, oh, it's dirty looking. Well, it wasn't dirty at all. You couldn't see anything. You just thought you could. And it was quite interesting. And they're still showing pictures of that dress. And those girls, all those young girls that are like little starlets now, are copying all these clothes that Cher wore in the old days. And they're doing exact copies, the Kardashians. Come up with a new idea, you know, that you don't have to wear what the old girl's wearing. It's not necessary. That's all I have to say.
Good night. Thank you very much because it's been a lovely evening. This is the after hours thing happening here all of a sudden.
First of all, I'd like to thank you, all 3 of you, for just a lovely, lovely evening, just very special. And I'm going to ask a question, and you may view it as, well, it's none of your business, but I wanted to ask you the size of the archives of all of your designs over time, and if you have made a definitive decision as far as what will happen to them someday.
When you croak is what you mean.
From my cold, dead hand.
Well, you know, when I was very, very young in the business, I was a young man coming into a business that usually doesn't have young men working in it. And I used to give away sketches. If I did a show and say, oh, I love that sketch, and I said, here. And then all of a sudden I looked around and a fellow named Erte, that French designer, was selling these sketches of his from the Folie Bergère and all those French tits and feather shows that he was doing back in the old days. And I thought, you know, I had to hang on to most of my sketches. And, you know, I might need that extra $1 or $2 in the future. And so I have most of them. Out in the lobby, you'll see a lot of sketches that are fairly current, but some of those are 20, 30, 40 years old. And so they're not all brand new. They weren't done last week. And some were. You know, you have to kind of look at them and figure the old boy's still drawing, so it's okay.
But in answer to your question, no. The answer is no. No decision has formally been made. And, you know, a couple of universities have contacted Bob and said, would you like to give your archive to us? It's complicated because some of those things are still owned by Cher. And so she...
Well, when it comes to the clothes.
When it comes to the actual clothes, Mr. Mackie owns the sketches. So no, the answer is no.
But it's really hard because we have friends that are gone now, designers that started back in the 40s doing shows and donated things to colleges, and somehow it ends up on a shelf, you know, way high. Nobody knows it's even there, and someone will discover it one day, but nobody's using it. Nobody's using them to learn from, and that makes me kind of sad, really. So I'm hoping that by doing these books and things, there'll be a lot of information that people can learn from. Because you don't know everything when you start, believe me. I didn't. And I don't know everything now, but I'm doing my best. Yes.
Hi. I just had a question about a little bit about the creative process and what the relationship was with hair and makeup and how that works with your costumes and if you're involved in that.
99% of the time, when I'm doing shows, I will design the hair and have a lot to say about the makeup. Because very often, you know, let's face it, the hairdresser is thrilled to do some new hairdo that may be absolutely wrong for the character or for the star or whatever. It's not their fault, but that is the only thing they really work on. And of course, on the Carol Burnett show, every Monday I would come into work on the early side, and I'd have sketches of all the hairdos for the entire show for the next week. And I would stop at the hairdresser, which was, what's your name? The older stuff. No. See, he doesn't know their names either.
Vern.
Anyway, I would drop off hairdos, you know, hairdo sketches, and that became, and the hairdressers were delighted, the wig ladies and everything, because they didn't have a script. Nobody ever gave them a script. And we very often had special people that did just that work. And sometimes the people that were working at the actual studios had too many drinks the night before, and the hair wasn't so great, if you know what I mean. Yes?
Question. What was it like working with Carol Channing?
Well,
I have no idea.
I hate you for asking that question. How many times I've seen him doing that fucking Channing?
well, you know what? Carol Channing was truly, I met her very early on in my career, and I thought, wow, she's a number, that one. And she really was. But she was so much fun, and she knew exactly how she wanted to look. There was no, what if I do this or what if I do that? She knew. She had worked on that character, and she wasn't like that at all. She had, you know, she had this low voice that when she really talked to you, it sounded like that. But then it became like that. You know, she was just the wildest character ever.
There's a great special with Carol Channing and that Ray did.
Yes, what's the other lady's name?
She is so much trouble, but you have to watch on YouTube because Carol is immaculate. She uses every prop, every costume. Pearl Bailey is the other one.
Pearl
She
Bailey,
didn't give a
who was a
crap.
fabulous
Performer.
but she didn't bother to learn all the choreography. She didn't bother to do it. And Carol Channing was absolutely brilliant. And
It's on YouTube, and you can't imagine how clean Carol is. She's so rehearsed. She worked everything out Pearlie was just doing her show.
I mean, if you could imagine Carol Channing doing songs from Fiddler on the Roof that Tevye sang, you just can't imagine that. And it's amazing how good she was and how funny she was. Really, really good. Pearl Bailey you can keep.
Yes, hi. So I'm speaking for my family because they're very jealous that I'm in Sedona and they're all the way in Iowa where I live. And they were dying to know. I know someone already asked what's your favorite design, but one of the two questions that really caught their attention was what design or trend is currently inspiring you right now? And along with that, what trend do you hope not to come back? Like, you just don't like the trend at all and you don't want that to come back?
Which trends do we see right now?
What are your favorite trends right now, and which you just?
I don't have any favorite trends right now. The trend that you see the most of is because people spent the whole year or more in their sweatpants and their t-shirts at home, and you go to the grocery store and they're wearing the same thing. I live in Palm Springs, so it's really very similar probably. I mean, you know, Sedona and Palm Springs this week had exactly the same temperatures, exactly. And I thought I was home. But I don't know. It's really hard. It used to be fashion would change every year or two, and it would be a drastic change. And you see skirts change and shoulder pads go in, come out. You know, when you get to be my age, you start seeing the same damn shit coming and going. They wear, you know, you say, we did that dress back in the 60s. We don't need to do it again. Let's do something else. But, you know, I remember after the Second World War, women wore very similar things during the war. And the minute the war was over, the new look, they called it, came in. Skirts got longer and fuller. And there was more fabric to have. And it was an exciting time in fashion. I don't think fashion's very exciting right now. I had a lady interview me today, and she was dressed the way she likes to dress. And I told her, I said, I love the fact that you just wear what you like to wear, and you look great. Her name is Tanya.
Tanya, she's right
She's in the corner. Stand up, Tanya.
Oh, she's here. I didn't know she's here. She interviewed me this morning, and I was thrilled. And, you know, if somebody looks like that and dresses like that, I want to go home with them.
Oh, jeez. Denny and Bob and everyone, we have time for one more question before we have a very special presentation for Bob. It's right back here in the balcony.
Mr. Mackie, I wanted to know if you can make anyone look glamorous, and if you had one tip for all of us who might be limited on resources or time, what would you give them?
Well, you know, that's a hard one, because your life doesn't, sometimes lives aren't glamorous, and you walk around dressed up glamorous, and people say, what is she doing? The crazy woman, you know. But I love it when people have their own style, and they love